This is In the Pink Sports, where women's sports aren't a sidebar, they're the headline. I'm Mara Flynn Cassidy, journalist, fan, and unapologetic champion of women's sports. And every week we bring you the moments that move the game, from record-breaking performances to the conversations reshaping the future of athletics. Because the truth is, women's sports aren't having a moment, they're building a movement. If it's bold, if it's groundbreaking, if it's pushing the game forward, we're talking about it. The field is set in the NCAA Women's Final Four, and it features four of the most dominant programs in the country. We're talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks, the UConn Huskies, the Texas Longhorns, and the UCLA Bruins. We'll break down how they got there, what happened in the Elite Eight on March 30th, and what to expect when these teams collide on the biggest stage, plus a lot more. But let's start with the games that punched the tickets. It was Texas beating the Michigan Wolverines by a decisive 77-41 score. That was a statement performance from the Longhorns. From the opening tip, Texas controlled the tempo of the game. Their defense was suffocating, forcing turnovers and limiting Michigan to difficult shots throughout the night. By the half, Texas had already built a substantial lead. In the second half, they continued to extend it. Their ability to dominate both ends of the floor, especially on defense, made this one of the most lopsided Elite Eight games of the tournament. In the other Elite Eight matchup on March 30th, it was the South Carolina Gamecocks beating the TCU Horned Frogs by a score of 78-52. South Carolina showcased exactly why they are one of the most complete teams in the country. They controlled the paint, they dictated the pace, and executed effectively with efficiency. TCU had moments early in the game, but South Carolina's depth and physicality wore them down as the game went on. By the fourth quarter, the Gamecocks had firmly established control, and they closed out the win. So now, with those results, the Final Four is officially set, and it is loaded. Let's take a look at the matchups. The South Carolina Gamecocks will face the UConn Huskies. This is a matchup between two programs with championship pedigrees. South Carolina brings depth, defense, and physicality. UConn brings precision, execution, and experience. This game could really come down to tempo. If UConn controls the pace and gets quality perimeter looks, they'll have the advantage. But if South Carolina turns it into a physical battle in the paint, they'll have the edge. We'll have to see. On the other side of the coin, the Texas Longhorns will take on the UCLA Bruins. This game, it all comes down to physicality and defense. Texas has shown it can dominate defensively. UCLA has shown it can control the boards and protect the rim. It could be one of the most physical games of the tournament. So let's take a deeper dive into what makes each of these teams so dangerous. The South Carolina Gamecocks are one of the most complete teams in the country. They can score inside, defend aggressively, and rotate players without losing any effectiveness. The UConn Huskies are disciplined and efficient. They rarely make mistakes and excel in executing their game plan. In the other matchup, it's the Texas Longhorns that are built on defense. They disrupt offenses and they force teams out of their rhythm. But the UCLA Bruins bring size and rebounding. They control the paint and they limit second chance opportunities. Now let's look ahead. Let's pull out the crystal ball here. The possible championship matchups are South Carolina versus Texas, UConn versus UCLA, or a mix of both styles. So if South Carolina advances, their physicality is going to be tough to match. If UConn moves on, their execution will give them the edge. If Texas makes it through, their defense will carry them. And if UCLA ends up in the championship game, their size could dominate. Right now, the Southern California girl has to step back and say, South Carolina and UConn feel like the strongest contenders. But this tournament has shown us, nothing's guaranteed. This week's athlete to watch is Camila Cardozo of the South Carolina Gamecocks. Her presence in the lane, her rebounding ability, and defensive impact make her one of the most important players remaining in the tournament. Now let's shift from the college game to the pros with the WNBA, where even though the regular season hasn't tipped off yet, the league is dominating the headlines. As of right now, there are no regular season games being played, with the 2026 season scheduled to start in early May. But even without games on the court, the WNBA is arguably at one of the most important moments in its history. Let's start with the biggest business story. The Comets are returning to Space City. Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta is buying the Connecticut Sun and moving the team to Houston for the 2027 season. The deal is worth a reported record $300 million. It's still pending approval by the WNBA's Board of Governors, but it looks like it will go through. This is really significant for several reasons. First, it brings back one of the most iconic franchises in league history. The Houston Comets were the WNBA's first dynasty, winning 4 consecutive championships from 1997 to 2000. Second, it highlights just how much the value of women's sports franchises has increased. A $300 million valuation signals that investors see long-term growth and profitability in the league. And that growth is being reinforced by the league's new collective bargaining agreement. The new CBA dramatically increases players' salaries and benefits. The salary cap's expected to jump from about $1.5 million to $7 million per team. And the average salaries are projected to rise to over $500,000, with top players earning well over $1 million annually. That is a massive shift. For years, one of the biggest challenges for the league was retaining talent domestically. Now players can build full careers in the WNBA without needing to play overseas just to make the bills. There's also movement in the terms of expansion. New teams are being added, including franchises in cities like Toronto and Portland, with more markets expected to follow. That expansion means more roster spots, more opportunities, and more visibilities for players entering the league. And that brings us right back to the NCAA tournament, because the players we're watching in the Final Four right now, they're the future of the WNBA. So even without games being played this week, the WNBA is still one of the biggest stories in sports, because what's happening right now is not just about one season. It's about the total future of the league. Now it's on to the National Women's Soccer League. One of the most notable recent results came from the Orlando Pride, who defeated the Chicago Stars by a final score of 3-0. This was a match where Orlando established control early. They scored 3 goals in the first half, effectively putting the game out of reach before halftime. Their attacking movement was sharp and their finishing was clinical. Chicago struggled to generate sustained offensive pressure and was unable to respond after falling behind. Another major storyline in women's soccer is happening off the field as well. The San Diego Wave recently made headlines by signing forward Catarina Macario to a long-term deal reportedly worth $8 million. It's one of the most significant contracts in women's soccer history. The move signals not just a commitment to winning, but a broader shift in investment across the league. Now let's take a look at hockey and the Professional Women's Hockey League. In one of the latest results, Montreal defeated New York by a score of 3-1. This victory extended Montreal's point streak to 11 consecutive games, tying a league record and reinforcing their position as one of the top teams in the league right now. In that game, Montreal controlled the pace through strong puck possession and disciplined defensive play. New York had opportunities, but Montreal consistently limited high-quality scoring chances and capitalized on their own. Another recent result saw Seattle beat New York 4-1, showcasing strong offensive pressure and consistent defensive structure. Seattle got out to an early lead and never allowed New York to regain momentum, controlling the game from start to finish. What stands out right now in the PWHL is parity and consistency. Multiple teams are competing at a high level, and every game has implications for playoff positioning. Now let's take a deeper look at the business side of women's sports, because this week the growth is impossible to ignore. Let's start with a major milestone in hockey. The Professional Women's Hockey League has now surpassed 2 million total fans in attendance, marking another record-setting moment for the league. And that growth is not just happening in arenas, it's happening on television as well. For the first time, PWHL games are being broadcast nationally in the United States, expanding access to millions of viewers and increasing visibility for the league. Meanwhile, in soccer, the National Women's Soccer League continues to break records. A recent match featuring Denver's new expansion team drew over 63,000 fans. That sets a new attendance record for the league. Just think about that. More than 63,000 fans in the stands for a women's professional soccer match. That's not just growth, that is transformation. And when you combine that with record player contracts, increased media coverage all around, and rising viewership, the picture becomes very clear. Women's sports are no longer emerging. They are expanding, and they're doing it fast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now it's time for your Rapid Fire 5. The South Carolina Gamecocks advance with a dominant win. The Texas Longhorns deliver one of the most decisive victories of the tournament. The UConn Huskies continue their strong run, and the UCLA Bruins bring size and defense into the Final Four. The national championship picture, it's wide open. So keep on watching, keep on cheering, keep on supporting women's sports, because the future of sports, it's looking pretty pink. That's it for this week's episode of In the Pink Sports. If you loved what you heard, subscribe, follow, and share the show, because the more we amplify women's sports, the louder the crowd gets. And trust me, the crowd is just getting started. Join us next week as we continue putting women's athletics exactly where they belong, front and center. Until then, I'm Mara Flynn Cassidy. Stay loud, stay proud, and keep showing up for women's sports.